My name is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I run Spainguru.es, and this is the free Spanish non-lucrative visa webinar from Spainguru. And today is Monday, 11th August 2025. The way I structure this webinar is a timeline. So we have 3 chapters: before the application, during the application, and after the approval. We're going to start with some general definitions, talk about how consulates work, about BLS, third-party service, tourist versus residency immigration status in Spain and Shenhen area, some tax considerations, and then we're gonna go through the NLB eligibility, documentations, and requirements, and talking in depth about the most important ones. Then we're gonna go through the timing of the application and the process, and how you arrive to Spain. If you want to renew your non-lucrative residence, we're gonna talk about that, how to go into long-term residence after 5 years, potentially obtaining the citizenship, Spanish citizenship, and the most common pathways in order to transition to work permits. The content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulate requirements. A little bit about Spainguru before we start. Our objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014, and you can find some wonderful reviews out there. And if you'd like to leave a review, on the top green bar, there's a red button that will redirect you to Trustpilot, where you can leave a review if you think the information I share with you today is valuable. You can use Spainguru for absolutely free. There's so many free resources, like the weekly newsletter that I send every Monday at 10:15 a.m. CET, where I feature the top discussions in social media, also the most watched video and investigation blog posts. I have a YouTube channel with almost 1,000 videos. Half of them are from Non-Lucrative Visa or about Non-Lucrative Visa, and a blog with more than 1,800 articles as of today, and a very vibrant community of Facebook groups and Reddits with an aggregated total of 150,000 members, where you can find the largest Spanish Non-Lucrative Visa Facebook group out there that you can join today. I highly recommend you doing so if you haven't done yet. Also on Spainguru.es, you can find more webinars, 6 webinars in total. All of them are free. And a Move to Spain checklist that I recently released that goes step by step with all the different things that, in my opinion, you should consider or do before moving to Spain. And it's a timeline that starts even 1 year before your intended arrival in Spain. So it's pretty complete, in my opinion. So check it out. It is absolutely free. And of course, if you want to check my partners, I have personally vetted my partners. Some of them, or many of them actually, I have used them personally. I highly recommend you at least engaging with immigration experts and tax advisors, at least consulting, just to make sure that your long-term strategy for staying in Spain is correct and there are no red flags. So those 2 things, at the very least, I would at least consult with an experienced expert. And then you can also find financial planners and so many other experts there. And if you plan to apply for the visa, you can find NLB compliant health insurance, medical certificates, strong translations, apostle services, and many other auxiliary services like bank accounts, money transfer services, property rentals, even mortgages if you plan to buy a property in Spain, and more than 100 services vetted by me. Now let's start with the timeline of the presentation. First of all, what is the Spanish non-lucrative visa? This is a Spanish visa for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves and who don't need to work in Spain. And then underline, in Spain. The law and the regulations. So there is a main law, which is higher in the hierarchy, which is the Ley Orgánica 4/2000, okay? Hasn't changed in 25 years. And then there is the regulation of the law, okay, that articulates the general direction of the main law. But it is lower hierarchy, and this is very important to understand it. And this is called the Reglamento de Extranjería, okay? And this is what it recently changed and took effect on May 20th, 2025. So it's very important to understand that there is a difference in hierarchy into these 2 laws. One is a main organic law, and the other one is a regulation of the law. We're going to talk about that later on, and also the implications that that has. Now let's talk about consulates, okay? Spain, of course, has consulates all over the world, but focusing in consulates US, UK, Canada, and Australia. I have created a dedicated page for each of the consulates in those 4 countries that you can find on Spainguru.es/Spain Non-Lucrative Visa. And it's important that you understand that you can only apply for the non-lucrative visa only from outside of Spain, at a Spanish consulate. And there's two options. Either it is the consulate that serves the area where you're a legal resident, or if you're a dual passport holder, for example, you're American Colombian and you have the Colombian passport, potentially you could also apply from a Spanish consulate in Colombia, right? As I said, there's a dedicated page for each consulate on Spainguru.es. And why is that interesting for you? Because I list every single first-hand experience of people applying for non-lucrative visas for each of those consulates. And as you probably heard, each consulate is a different world. They have different requirement interpretations, have different, even like hidden requirements that, you know, people share on Spainguru's Facebook group that are not listed online. So it's important to be prepared and up to date. So one of the resources that I offer you for free on Spainguru.es is actually condensating all the first-hand experience that I can get into my hands and put them there so you can learn from them and stay updated. Now, many consulates don't do the processing of their visas by themselves, but use a third party, you know, a private company. Also, not all the visas are processed by a third party. Some consulates maybe use a company, like in this case, BLS International, for their Schengen visas and not for the non-lucrative visas, okay? So it's important that you understand whether the non-lucrative visa is being processed by this company, okay? So in the UK, all the consulates use BLS International for the processing of NLV. In the US, not all the consulates, for example, New York doesn't use it, but Miami does. Los Angeles and San Francisco do also from the beginning of this year. Houston, I understand, Chicago as well. So it's important that you understand whether BLS International uses it. So you can find it also on the dedicated pages for your consulates on Spainguru.es, the official links that will direct you to the requirements page in English and Spanish for the non-lucrative visa. And there you will find, or not, you will find in the official source whether they use the BLS office or not. Okay, so BLS International is an Indian company. It's huge. It operates in more than 60 countries. It is in the Indian Stock Exchange, in case you want to invest. And yeah, they basically, their mission is to do the appointments, get your paperwork, filter everything, put everything in order so that the Spanish consulate receives your file in the way they want. Okay, so that's the purpose. But they don't have, let's say, a legal say into this. Okay, they're not the ones who deny you or not. This is just a processing third party that some Spanish consulates use, most of them now. We're going to talk about this, so it's important that you understand what the Schengen area is. It's a group of 29 countries in 2025, European countries that are internally borderless. Okay, so that's the map, and that has implications as well. Later on, we're going to talk about that. Now, if you enter the Schengen area as a tourist, okay, depending which passport you hold, you will need a Schengen visa or not. Citizens from USA, Australia, Canada, UK don't need a Schengen visa. But for example, Filipinos require a Schengen visa in order to enter the Schengen area, including Spain. Okay, of course, Spain is part of the Schengen area, right? But some EU countries are not part of the Schengen area. For example, Ireland, okay? Some countries that are not part of the European Union are part of the Schengen area, like Norway, yes, which is not Schengen, or Switzerland, right? Now, if you plan to stay more than 90 days, coming back, you can stay as a tourist in the Schengen area for up to 90 days in a 180-day rolling period. Now, if you plan to stay longer, you need to obtain a visa that will grant you a residency in any of these member states, okay? Now, talking specifically about Spain, you need to obtain a residency if you need to stay longer than 90 days, okay? And the non-lucrative visa will grant you the right to obtain a non-lucrative residency to stay in Spain normally and generally up to 5 years, okay, with renewals, right? Why is it called a temporary visa? Because it is less than 5 years. Visas or residencies over 5 years are called long-term residencies, right? And you can change from a non-lucrative residency into a long-term residency after 5 years in Spain, right? Now, it's important to understand that if you are a citizen of European Union or you are married to a citizen of European Union and associate countries like Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, then the non-lucrative visa is not for you, okay? And also there are people who have the possibility to obtain potentially an European passport, like many British maybe can obtain a Irish passport, okay? And they're thinking like, should I apply for a non-lucrative visa before I get the passport? It's better. In my opinion, it is much better to obtain the European passport, first of all, because it's much easier to be in Spain and you have more rights. For example, the European Union passport holders and their spouses who plan to retire in Spain or not work in Spain, they have to show much less money in their bank, more or less 7,200 euros, although there are regional variations, okay, compared to 28,800 euros. They will also get a permit for 5 years, okay, a residency permit for 5 years without prior renewals, and they have the right to work. So all those things are very, very important and different from the non-lucrative visa. Now, if you are a non-EU passport holder, and you plan to live in Spain without working, then the non-lucrative visa is the right choice, probably. Now, let's talk a little bit about taxes. And the most important concept is tax residence in Spain. So there are 3 conditions to become tax resident in Spain, okay? Any of them would make you a tax resident. And what happens when you become a tax resident? You will pay taxes on your global income and potentially taxes on the net value of your assets globally, okay, to Spanish tax authorities. Now, the most common condition is if you spend over 183 days in Spain within a calendar year from January 1st to December 31st, okay, that's the tax year, which is different than the immigration year. Immigration year is a natural year. For example, you arrive in July and it's until July next year. The tax year is from January 1st to December 31st. So if you spend physically in Spain more than 183 days in a calendar year, you will become a Spanish tax resident. Those days don't need to be consecutive and is regardless of your immigration status. You can be a tourist, you can be a visa holder, you can be a residency holder, right? It doesn't matter why you are in Spain. If you're physically in Spain, those days count. So make sure if you don't want to become a tax resident during a specific tax year, make sure to spend less than 183 days in Spain. Now, second condition is if your main economic activity or primary income source is in Spain. And third, if your family lives in Spain, okay? Those could also be conditions to become a Spanish tax resident, right? And a little overview about Spanish taxes, because it's all linked. Immigration and taxes, they need to, they need to be friends. You need to make sure that there are no red flags when you move to Spain in these 2 important verticals, right? So first, you have an income tax with varying progressive rates, starting at 19% up to 47%. There are some small regional variations. A lot of people think, oh, if I make 100K a year, there is the 5th tax bracket on the right column. Oh, I make 100K, I will be paying 45% tax rate. That's not true. Actually, the effective tax rate will be around 36%. This is a ballpark figure. Now, there is also the Form 720. You will need to disclose foreign assets, okay, like properties, bank accounts, if the asset category is over 50,000 euros. Then there is the regional wealth tax. There is a solidarity tax that is nationwide, but kicks in at a higher threshold of 3 million plus allowances and deductions. And remember that Spain has double taxation agreements with most countries, including the USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and many more. And depending where you move in Spain, there is a strong impact in your potential taxation. So remember that regional rules vary significantly. It's very, very essential to consult with a experienced tax advisor, right? And this slide is about going deeper into why 100K income pays 36% effective tax rate and not 45%. And I did a calculation here with a different amount of income. For example, if you're making 30K, you will pay an effective tax rate on your income for 24%. And it goes, as you can see, progressively higher. So 40K, 26%, 50, 29%, 60K, 30%, up to 36 if you're making 100K. If you want to know more about taxes, please join my webinar that I have every 15 days. And again, it is free. I send you the recording when we're done. You can ask your question in your Q&A sessions. Of course, I'm not a tax advisor, but I do my best to give you, at least point you in the right direction, okay? Well, that's what we're referring about the questions. Of course, the webinar will give you a big nice overview about Spanish taxes and how they work. Now let's go through the non-lucrative visa documentation. This is a summary list. Always check official requirements and documentation, but just this is a list so that we can go deeper into each one of them. First, you will need to say where you're moving in Spain, and depending on the consulate, some consulates will be more restrictive about the information. Okay, so many consulates you just say, "Oh, I'm moving to Seville province, or to Valencia province, or to Basque country," but some consulates will require you to show a rental contract. Okay, some say 3 months using Airbnb or Booking.com, for example. Some say minimum 6 months. Okay, so you need to understand whether the consulate is having this strict requirement. Okay, I have interviewed Ainhoa Manero of Sterna Abogados, one of my vetted partners, about this, and she says that her customers will never have to show a rental contract because this is a strict interpretation that some consulates have that they shouldn't. And in the end, she always wins this argument with the consulate, and her customers never have to get a rental contract in advance. However, many people choose to comply with this in order to reduce friction, and they rent a property. Some people have tricks like, they rent a property on Airbnb for a few months with a cancellation policy so that they can cancel it if they don't get the visa granted, etc. So it is quite complex. There is no clear answer for this situation, but make sure to join the groups and talk to people, because some consulates have these requirements, so you can ask other people who have actually went through this, how did they solve this. Second, addressing the country of residence. As I said, you can apply from the consulate that serves the area or the jurisdiction where you live legally. So, for example, if you live in Atlanta, Georgia, in the US, and you apply at BLS Miami, you would have to show your driving license, proving that you're a legal resident in that area of jurisdiction. Then prove sufficient financial means to support yourself and dependents if you're going with a family or a couple. Have a comprehensive health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain. Or there is the option, if you happen to be a UK retiree, you can use the S1 form and apply instead of a private health insurance with the S1 form that grants you access to public healthcare system in Spain. Then there is the clean criminal background check, ACRA in the UK, FBI background check in the States. Medical certificate, which is very different from the health insurance policy. It is a one-page document. Then if you're applying with spouses, you will need to provide a new marriage certificate, like original copy, that has a certain validity period. So you can't use the one that you got from 1970s, for example, or the 80s. You need to get a new one. And if you're applying with children, birth certificates, okay, same way. Many consulates will ask you to swear, or write, a letter of intent where you express that you will not engage in any work or professional activities, especially if you're under working age. Okay, if you are if you are in working age, like in your 20s, 30s, 40s, you will face more scrutiny. As I said, potentially you will have to apply with a letter of intent. It is not always a requirement, but in many cases it makes sense to provide one. Okay, and some consulates it is an official requirement to provide a letter of intent. I have templates on Spainguru. Okay, and if you're applying with children, also some consulates are asking for school enrollment, even in advance, and providing photos, pictures of your faces. That people, consulates that work with BLS office, they take your photo in the office. You will have to pay fees, to apply, etc., etc. Okay, so every single applicant has to provide documents. If you're applying, it's 4 of you, you will all have to apply with documentation. Okay, if you want to know the answer from Ainhoa Manero, expert immigration lawyer, to 55 frequently asked questions. This is not an old video. It is less than 6 months. Okay, of course, this is evolving all the time, but most of these questions are super valid. So I highly recommend you to join Spainguru's YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel, watch the videos. As I said, half of my videos are about the Spanish non-lucrative visa. Sometimes I make these incredible interviews that provide you, let's say, legal advice in a way, because it's an immigration lawyer, expert immigration lawyer. So I recommend you watching those videos. And of course, it's absolutely free. Now let's talk about the financial requirements. 2025. You need to provide proof that you have sufficient funds to sustain yourself and your spouse and children if you move with your family, right? How much you need to show, right? This is based on an index called IPREM index, okay? It is an index that is published every year, Generally, it goes up, okay? It goes up, but certain years it just stays flat. Why? Because this index requires that a new national budget is published. And in order to get a new national budget, there has to be political agreement. And there's been several years where there hasn't been a political agreement about the budget. Therefore, the government cannot update the IPREM. So if you look at the progression, in the last 3 years, 2023, 24, and 25, it has stayed the same at 600 euros per month or 7,200 euros per year. But it could go up next year, for example, and that will replace the values in euros of your financial requirements. So right now, as we are today, they say that it's very probable that there's not going to be agreement also in 2026, okay? But don't count on it, always be conservative. But now the main applicant is 400% of the IPREM, okay, for one applicant, okay, main applicant. So it's 7,200 euros per year, multiplied by 4 is 28,800 euros. You can see that on the table on the right. A couple, it's plus a dependent, okay? A married couple, for example, wife or husband will be 7,200 euros more. Therefore, a couple is 36,000 euros, okay? Plus one children is 7,200 euros, etc., right? So those are the minimum thresholds. The funding can be savings, okay, so money in a bank, or passive income, for example, a pension, or a combination of both, okay? You can receive a pension, but if maybe it's not enough for this threshold, you can say, oh, but look at this, I have $1 million in the bank, okay? That also helps. But it could also be rental income as well, dividends. Be careful with rental income. Some consulates consider it not to be a safe source of income, so it should be used as a complement of your passive income, other kinds of passive income, and savings, okay? So use it with caution, let's say, rental income. Although many people have been accepted just purely with rental income, there has been some changing considerations by certain consulates. Now, how you prove this? Via bank statements, okay? And documentation from your bank, wherever you are having the money or receiving the money, okay? We're gonna talk about recent changes about extra documentation from the banks later on. Some consulates will ask you for tax returns, even several years backwards, okay? Even up to 3 years of tax returns. And have this in mind, that in order to renew your visa after 1 year of residence in Spain, you will have to renew for a 2-year period. So the state wants to know whether you will have enough money to sustain yourself during that 2-year period. That's why people say, if you have savings, for example, only savings and not passive income, recurring passive income, if you only have in bank, you will have to show double the amount of the initial application, provided the IPREM hasn't gone up. So if you're a couple, in the initial application with 36,000, you will have to show that you have savings for 72,000 euros in order to get your renewal for 2 more years. This is only if you have savings, purely savings. But if you have passive recurring income, that counts differently, right? If you make pension, you make 30K per year, in 2 years, that means that you have 60K, okay, of that pension, right? So it counts differently, right? We're gonna look at the case, a calculation of specific case scenario of a renewal later on. As I said, lately, as of 20th May 2025, many consulates started to also require extra documentation from their banks, like showing full bank name and address, okay, via a original official certificate from the bank. They want to know that your name matches with the name that appears in the account, and that everything, there's no red flags really. Second, full account identification, okay, so the number of the bank account, and they also want account opening date or closing date if applicable, and 2 very controversial ones. First, balance as of December 31st of the previous year. Okay, so if you're applying in 2025, they want to know how much money you had in the bank account as of December 31st previous year, and an average balance, monthly balance for the previous year. So they want to know more or less the fluctuation of your cash in your bank account for the previous years. Okay, why they're asking this and why is it so controversial? And here I will show you my bank account. Okay, I use BBVA. Here you can see Bruno Bianchi Sarcone is the owner of this bank account with this number, and this is a certificate, and it has like an image of a stamp. I haven't scanned this. This is something that I download from my app, so it's entirely digital. But there is like a wet stamp there. This is what the authorities want to see, okay? This kind of certificate, because this is common in Spain. The banks provide this kind of certificate. But I will tell you that 99% of people applying from the US or UK or Canada or Australia, their banks don't provide these certificates. They don't. So it is something really uncommon. A lot of people are getting very paranoid about this. So in order to address this issue, I interview again Ainhoa Manero, okay? And you can watch this video on Spainguru's YouTube channel, where she says that, long story short, but I highly recommend you watching the video. Long story short is like, you shouldn't get nervous about this. You have to provide whatever you can that is the closest to the requirements to apply, okay? So maybe you can't get, let's say, a monthly balance for the previous year, but you can make an Excel, okay, where you calculate the monthly balance, and you go to the notary and you notarize it, okay, so make it look official. Or maybe go to the bank and you show the Excel so they can, write a letter or something saying that this is correct and true. This kind of things, okay? So watch the video because she can give you more clues. But this is not that it's not that you can't apply for the non-lucrative visa. Rather than you need to adjust a little bit the information in order to comply with these new requirements, okay? Another question that people make is, can I work remotely for non-Spanish companies? Because as I said, in the first slide, this is for people who don't need to work in Spain, because this is what the rule says, okay? It doesn't say if you have to work remotely for a non-Spanish company. This is actually a gray area. And there's actually a Supreme Court ruling saying that if you work remotely, okay, if you have active income from outside of Spain, it's okay, actually. So it is a gray area. Because this type of visa residency was created before the working remotely was as common as today. So if you want to watch a video where I interview Ainhoa about this, she tells you exactly this, okay? I'm not telling you that it is good or ethical or bad to work under a non-lucrative visa remotely always for a non-Spanish company, but I can perfectly tell you that I know many people who are doing it or did it, even YouTubers out there that you can find on YouTube, and that openly are doing it in front of your eyes, okay? And nothing has happened. These people have obtained a non-lucrative visa, complying with the non-lucrative visa requirements, that is savings, passive income, etc. And maybe even they were working before, but they didn't show it, or after getting their visa, they started working remotely, and they paid their taxes in Spain from their active income, but when they renewed their non-lucrative visa, they didn't use active income to prove that they had enough funding. Right? Potentially now it is more interesting for you to apply for the digital nomad visa instead, which is for remote workers rather than the non-lucrative visa. But if you are in this situation, understand that it is a gray area. It's not well defined by this type of visa. And but there's something very important. If you mention, or just a quick moment, over 60% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. That's a lot of people getting value without hitting that button. 60% of you. If my videos have helped you understand Spain's immigration process, visas, or life here, even just once, please subscribe now. I'm working hard to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2025, and your click truly makes a difference. Thanks so much. Now, let's keep going. You create the slightest doubt to the consulate official that you are working or you plan to work, and even if you can legally say it, but say like, oh, I want to take a sabbatical year with a non-lucrative visa, but then I plan to come back, and start working. Even if you say that, and you should be in your right to say so, you will be denied, okay? I've seen people who wrote in their letter of intent, trying to be honest, okay? Trying, like, look, I want to stay in Spain for 1 year under the non-lucrative visa, but then, I will go back to the States and resume working, okay? Boom, denial. Yes, that's how it works. And just also to underline how different the consulates can be, and also the gray area in which certain jobs can actually be accepted, okay? There is this special case at Edinburgh Consulate, UK, where this family, and this family actually is a Spainguru community members, showed that, the husband is working at the oil rig, like oil platform in Northern Sea, and flies every 15 days to the UK to work, and still they got the non-lucrative visa. And this situation is part of the official description of the non-lucrative visa written by the consulate itself. So it's really official. And also interviewing lawyers, they told me that they got also acceptance for the non-lucrative visa by pilots, okay, who travel maybe once a month to the US, okay, or to Canada to, fly a few long-haul flights, and then they go back to Spain where they don't work in Spain, okay? These people got their non-lucrative visas correctly. So if you're in any of these situations, I highly recommend you going with a lawyer, okay, with a experienced immigration lawyer that, of course, you can find on Spainguru.es. They are used to these situations and getting you the visas, okay? So I'm not telling you to work under a non-lucrative visa, just trying to convey you how the legal stance is. Now let's talk about the private health insurance requirements, right? So unless you are a UK retiree that you can access the public healthcare system via the S1 form, you need to get a private health insurance. And there are some conditions to be compliant. First, the policy cannot have any co-payments. Some consulates even mention that they shouldn't have reimbursements clauses. There has to be no waiting period, so it needs to be active at the very least in the moment in which you enter Spain, and full coverage, different medicine types, everything should be covered, okay? But I put an asterisk there because there are nuances, right? Most health insurances, I would say 99% of them, they require a yearly payment in advance because they need to provide you with a certificate of coverage that must be in Spanish and must have the correct wording, and it is a requirement by the consulates in order to give you the visa, okay? So this is important. Now let's go with the frequently asked questions. Are my medicines covered? The medicine cost by private health insurances? No, you will have to pay retail price. Good news is that the cost of medicines in Spain is quite low compared to any other country. What should be the health insurance start date? So many people say that at the time of the appointment, it should be active, okay? Many other people say it should be active the first day of the month in which you intend to enter Spain. And that, in my opinion, is more true, okay? First of all, you wouldn't use months in advance that you are paying months that you are not using. Second of all, some people that activated their health insurances at the time of the appointment got problems later on because they didn't have automatic renewal, and the consulate considered that they wouldn't have a full year in advance from the start date of the health insurance, of the visa, okay? Because they already have used 2 months or 3 months, which is the required, let's say, processing time for this type of visa, okay? There's no clear answer to this. The best is to go with an experienced exclusive agent or broker who is very, very used to this type of procedure, like non-lucrative visa or any other Spanish visa. Okay, of course, you can find recommended on Spainguru.es. But in my opinion, I think it makes absolute sense to start the health insurance during the first day of the month. Normally, they start on the first of each month, in which you intend to move to Spain. So some people say you have to guesstimate when you're going to obtain your visa, more or less, a little bit in advance, maybe started like 1 or 2 months after, if you selected the date in which you want to start it. And and just delay a little bit the start date, okay? Now, are there health insurances for people older than 75 years of age? Yes, at least I know that DKV and ADESLAS have solutions that are NLB compliant. What if I have pre-existing conditions? Okay, this is $1 million question and related to the condition with an asterisk, full coverage. So, depending on how serious the pre-existing condition is, you will either not get a coverage at all. So, unfortunately, you won't be able to get a health insurance that is compliant. For example, if you have had a cancer diagnosis in the previous 5 years, no. I mean, it's a straight no by most companies as far as I understand. But if you have like high blood pressure, stuff like this, for example, what they will do is that they will cover you, but they will exclude those pre-existing conditions. However, the visa will be, the policy will be compliant because they will still issue the certificate of coverage with the right wording in Spanish that the consulate will accept. Although, in fact, there is this exclusion for those pre-existing conditions. And once you move to Spain, if you have any problem related to those pre-existing conditions, you will not be covered. Okay, and you will have to pay out of pocket for treatment of those pre-existing conditions. Now, related to potential solutions to this situation, this is the next question. Can I pay into the Spanish public system? This is called the Convenio Especial. And yes, after 1 year of residence in Spain, This is called Convenio Especial de Asistencia Sanitaria, because there are different convenios especiales, okay? And each region, each of the 17 regions, because they all have their different health systems, they have their different procedure, okay? So you have 17 pages where you apply for the Convenio Especial. But the important thing is, and what is common to them, is that after 1 year of residence, you can pay, okay, and get access to the public healthcare system. You will pay 60 euros if you are younger than 65 years old, 60 euros per month, or 157 euros per month if you're older, right? The difference between this system and paying Social Security as a worker in Spain is that you will not get subsidized medicines, okay? You will still have to pay retail prices for the medicines. As I said, they're lower than anywhere else. But your pre-existing conditions treatment will be included. So it is interesting, okay? And many people consider, and I recommend you to be covered by private health insurance and also the public system. Of course, you have to pay for it and consider it, but also another thing important is that some people think that, oh, I will pay the private health insurance, but then when I renew my visa after 1 year, I'll get the Convenio Especial and I will stop paying my private health insurance. Don't do that, because it takes weeks. It takes weeks to get effective access to the public healthcare system, and you will get a gap in your health insurance, and that may put at risk your renewal of your non-lucrative visa. Okay, so at the very least, the first renewal, make them overlap. At the very least, if you plan to go to the public healthcare system, make them overlap, and maybe with time in advance and organization, apply for the second renewal with the public system. Can I use my current health insurance from the UK and the USA? Short answer is, if it's NLB compliant, yes. Okay, read the conditions. But in my humble opinion, and this is a long answer, is like I highly don't recommend it. First of all, health insurance companies, Spanish companies, have specific solutions for this, so they are used to this, okay? And your companies in the US and UK are not thinking about people applying for a Spanish visa. The certificate of coverage will not be in Spanish. You will have to translate it. It will not have the proper wording. It will have potentially co-payment clauses, because and reimbursement clauses, and could potentially be considered to be a travel health insurance by the official review in your case. So I don't recommend it if you want to avoid headaches. Do I need a Spanish bank account to get health insurance? No, actually, you don't. Okay, in most cases, exclusive agents or brokers don't require you to have a Spanish bank account. Okay, can I pay on a monthly basis? Now, if you have a Spanish bank account, some people said that depending on the policy, they could pay on a monthly basis and still get the certificate of coverage. But this is very, very uncommon. Okay, what it happens normally is that the first year you pay a full year in advance, you get your visa, and after this first year, you already get your resident bank account in Spain, and you start paying monthly your with automatic renewals, and still you get your certificate of coverage for your renewals. Okay, so this is the most common pathway. Not saying it's impossible to pay monthly, but it is not common nor likely. Now let's talk about the companies. You have Adeslas, which is by far the largest. Asisa, DKV, ASA, Salus, Caser, Sanitas, AXA, Mafre, and these companies are very similar. Sometimes there are some regions that they don't cover. For example, Basque Country, they have their, some specifics, etc. So this is, again, there is a condition that you have to be covered everywhere in Spain by the company, but it is not actually enforced, okay? Because there's, not all the, ASA, for example, has compliant policies, but they don't operate everywhere in Spain. Same happens with Adeslas, which is the largest. So there are areas in Spain where, they won't operate. So you have to pay attention to that when you hire, because you want to move to an area where they operate. But normally they operate in, let's say, 90% of the territory in Spain, and in the most common areas like Valencia, Malaga, etc., they operate 100%. I'm talking a little bit into more like special areas. Okay. Now, if size matters, as I said, Adesla is the largest with 29% of the market, and then you have Sanitas, Asisa, DKV, Mafre, etc., etc. Right. Now, some people have reported in Washington, D.C., and also now Manila in Philippines, that the BLS website is trying to sell them a travel health insurance. But it is very misleading. That type of health insurance that BLS itself wants to sell you is not a compliant health insurance for the non-lucrative visa. So be careful with that, because it's even written in the public official requirements, both in BLS and in the consulate itself. So don't be misled by this and get a compliant health insurance, okay? And if you need one, I highly recommend you at least contacting and getting a non-binding quote by my recommended exclusive agent, Carlos Blanco, who is not only an exclusive agent of Adeslas, okay, the top company, but it also is an expert immigration lawyer, and he knows everything about this process and any other immigration process. So it's a huge advantage working with someone who is not only selling health insurance, but also knows about the procedure and has been doing this for years, and also has a very interesting bonus here. He can extend in the future the start date of your insurance if needed, okay? Which is something that, as far as I understand, no other companies can do. They used to give you maybe 2 months to start it, but now it's much more common that only give you 1 month in advance. So people get very nervous to hire this health insurance right before the appointment. So it's very, let's say, unpleasant procedure or journey for people who are buying their health insurance. But I think Carlos offers this capability that makes it much more smoother. And here are a few first-hand experiences working with Carlos Blanco. Very extreme, very positive reviews, and I have been recommending him for more than 3 years. Okay, with stellar reviews about him. So highly recommended that you at least engage with him. Maybe you hire the policy, maybe you don't. It is free to contact him to get a non-binding quote and get maybe some advice, and potentially it is interesting for you. Now let's talk about the medical certificate. As I said before, has, let's say, nothing to do with the health insurance. This is a one-page document that should be signed by a certified doctor, okay? Now, there are some variations depending on where you're applying from, okay? For example, if you're applying at UK consulates and you use a UK doctor, the specific thing about this certificate is that it has to be apostilled, and the doctor needs to be registered at the Foreign Office, FCDO registered. So his signature needs to appear, and you need to apostille. Now, in the US, you don't need to apostille this certificate, neither in Australia or Canada. You don't need to. You just need to print the certificate with the, let's say, official letterhead of the doctor and stamp of the doctor saying like, okay, this is doctor with registration number, whatever, etc. So it looks official. Now, there is a trick here. There are some templates that the consulates provide, and some templates are only in English, okay? But if you sign only, if the doctor signs only the English template, you will need to also swan translate it, which costs around 40 euros that page to do it. If you want to save that swan translation, get the template that comes both in English and Spanish, and make sure that the doctor signs both, okay? There is also another option, which is using, first of all, in the UK, you can use ZoomDoc, which is an online provider with UK doctors. You will need to apostille and swan translate it, but it is fully online and you can use it and with a discount on Spainguru.es. Now, also Spainguru.es puts you in contact with a Spanish doctor. There are several advantages of using a Spanish doctor medical certificate. You don't need to swan translate it. You don't need to apostille it, okay? And it is fully online. You do a call, the doctor asks you stuff, okay, and provides and issues the certificate. Now, there is a little con out there that is important that you know it, is that certain consulates have a strict interpretation of the rules. Basically, they invented a requirement, which is that you need to be physically present in Spain at the moment of issuance of the medical certificate if it's by a Spanish doctor. Not all the consulates apply this interpretation, okay? For example, London and Edinburgh, they don't care if you are physically in Spain at the time of issue. Miami, neither, okay? Toronto, neither, for example, okay? If you go on Spainguru.es and you want to use this service, you just fill the form. It's a very short form, and you select the consulate where you're applying from, and the doctor will tell you, my certificate is being accepted regardless of where you are or not. Be careful. You need to be physically present in Spain, okay? But why is it interesting to have this doctor available, this Spanish doctor? Because sometimes, first question here says, my doctor won't sign the medical certificate template. What can I do? Change doctor. Sometimes you cannot find a doctor, so it's great to have your Spanish doctor. Or simply because you want to use the advantages of having a Spanish doctor, no swan translation, no apostille, so cheaper and faster. It's done online, okay? Now, another frequently asked question is, my doctor in the UK is not FCDO registered. Is his certificate valid? And the answer is no. Has to be FCDO registered. And something I didn't mention is that this certificate is basically a one-page stating, has to have the right wording, shouldn't be changed. Okay, so use a template from your consulate, because some doctors like to change the wording, like, to the best of my understanding, blah blah blah. No, if they put this, it could be a denial. Okay, so use the templates, right? And this basically states that you don't have like infectious diseases of a protocol of 2005, like Ebola, yellow fever, this type of things. Okay, which is funny because normally you can enter Spain for up to 90 days with all these illnesses. You can have Ebola, and enter Spain as a tourist for 3 months, and nothing happens. Only they will require you this certificate if you plan to stay longer than 90 days and you require a visa. So it's a bit funny, but unfortunately, Spanish bureaucracy is like this, and you need to go through it. Okay, and this is a table that just summarizes everything that I just told you. This is a little thing that happened that I never saw it again. I only saw it once in years, that someone at the Chicago consulate was required to apostille the certificate, and this person notarized the certificate and then apostilled the notarization of the certificate. And this is something that this person got required, and it's very, very crazy. If you're in the US, this is extremely uncommon, but since you are in this webinar, this is the most in-depth webinar on non-lucrative visa. I tell you things that could potentially happen, so you are prepared. Now let's talk about the clean criminal background check, the document that takes the longest to obtain. Generally, okay, there are people who got married, and today someone was mentioning, I got married in Cyprus, for example, and in Cyprus takes quite a long time to obtain your marriage certificate, sometimes longer than the ACRO. So be careful with that, okay? Always analyze your situation to understand what should come first, because it takes the longest to obtain, and what should be done at the end. I will share with you some general timelines, okay? But generally, the background check or the police check is the document that takes the longest to obtain. Must be squeaky clean in the last 5 years, nothing, okay? In the UK, it's called the ACRO, and you will need to apostille it and sworn translate it to Spanish, okay? And generally has a 6-month validity, always check. The FBI background check in the States needs a federal apostille, always, and sworn translation. And it has a 3 to 6 month validity, generally 6-month validity, and the state otherwise, but always check with your consulate. Frequently asked question, am I still eligible with records on my background check? It will depend how serious they are, okay? If there were conviction records, blood, crimes, etc., it could be a straight denial. For that, the best is to go through expungement processes, like basically ask the authorities to remove them because they happened a long time ago, and now you're let's say a reformed person, you will not do it. So, but if you apply for the visa, even if those things, serious things happened decades ago, they could be a denial. So if you have those, always go with legal help that you can find on Spainguru.es. Am I still eligible with a no live trace in the ACRO in the UK? Yes, you are, but it will require you probably an extra report that explains what type of record is hidden under the no live trace. No live trace is basically a record that you have that has been stepped down, and it's like not deleted, okay, but some sort of it. But the Spanish authorities want to know what kind of record you have under the no live trace. Can I expedite the background check federal apostille? Not really. Let's say the official expedite process ended in 2020, okay, but you can use private services that can get you a federal apostille in 10 days. And you can find that service on Spainguru.es, okay, in case you are in a rush. Okay, these are private services. You can always get apostille via the official, let's say, or state links, but they take 5-6 weeks, even sometimes longer. So be careful with that, okay? The FBI background check, you just go and you put your fingerprints at a USPS or channeler, and you get your FBI background check within the same day, right? But the apostille takes weeks, okay? So be careful. Can I notarize the background check and use the state apostille instead? People did this in the past, but now it's no longer possible. You will get denied. Where can I have my fingerprints taken? As I said, you go to a USPS that can scan your fingerprints, or use a private channeler that is connected to the FBI, and this is the way you can do it. Also, you can do it if you are in Spain. If you happen to be in Spain, you can also find those channelers, or you can use the police to take your fingerprints here in Spain and use it for this process. I have articles on both situations. What if my fingerprints are illegible? I also have articles about that. Send me an email to hello@spainguru.es if that could be your case, and I send you the links to the articles, okay? And people comment what I said, in the UK, it's taking 5 to 6 weeks to obtain the ACRO. There is a way that you pay, and it comes faster, but there are mixed answers about that. Some people say I got my acro in 3 days. Okay, and some people say like I paid for the premium service and I'm still waiting for it. So it's a bit not very reliable. Okay, in Canada it's great. It's taking short time. Okay, and also the apostille is quite fast now. It used to take months, and now it's quite fast. So great news. And now let's talk about proof of not working. Okay, a lot of people are retiring and want to retire in Spain, and this is why this is also commonly known as the retirement visa. Okay, but not everybody is not working at the time of application. So let's talk about these situations. First of all, if you're retiring and you show proof of receipt of a pension, that is the best you can have, because then you will not face extra scrutiny. Okay, if you're still working, in most cases the consulate will require you to quit, okay, and obtain a P45 form and submit that. In the US, a resignation letter, termination letter from the employer, both translated and notarized. And if you're freelancers, in the US, a notarized affidavit promising not to work, and in the UK, a letter from HMRC and accountants stating having ceased trading and the register for self-employment. So it's quite strict about that. Now, should I quit before I get the visa? And this is very gray, okay? And there are news, some people provided this and they got accepted in this situation. Some other people actually not, depending on the consulate. So we're going to quote some Spainguru community members so that you see how blurry the situation is for people who plan to stay working at the very last moment or even promising to stop working, provided they get their visa granted. Is renting out a property considered a job? No. If you have a property or just couple of properties that you rent long term, there are no like operations involved in it, it is passive income. But if you have 30 properties on Airbnb, it is considered to be a job. Okay, so if you're somewhere in the middle, make sure to, if you have the doubt, okay, some people say appoint a property manager just to make sure that that you are not part of the operations, and you can prove it so that it counts as passive income. Is investing in stocks considered active income? No. Can I volunteer while on an NLV? Yes, as long as you don't get paid. Still working at the time of application. And this is what I said before. For the UK consulates, they're quite strict about the P45. So someone says a P45 is one way, but so is a letter from your employer stating that you have resigned and will leave on a certain date. But someone else says, looks like it's a bit of a potluck if they accept a letter from HR department in place of a P45 if working to the last minute. So generally, UK consulates are quite strict about not working. Some people like apply, say that they will start working and everything, and then the consulate tells them like, you have 10 days to give me the P45, right? And then they give the P45 and then they get their visa granted. But basically, they want to make sure that you're not working, okay? And still, there are people posting and asking about this, but they don't get conclusive answers at the different UK consulates, about the flexibility of working until the last minute, okay? Most people quit in order to apply for the Non-Lucrative visa in the UK. This is the situation. So it depends how strict they are. Now, in the States, they tend to be less strict. For example, DC Consulate tells you officially that you can take a sabbatical year, that you can provide certain documentation, and it's fine. In Los Angeles Consulate BLS, people had submitted a notarized letter of intent stating, they plan to quit upon obtaining the visa, and that was fine. But then lately, someone in Houston said that, yeah, I promised to stop working by September 1st, and I don't want you to issue the visa until September 1st, I think it was. And the BLS representative explained that the letter was unacceptable because the intended retirement date is in the future, and that I can only apply after my retirement date. The fact, you see, so yeah, these things happen. So you have to be very careful about it. And recently, this was July, so last month, a few days ago, in Washington, D.C., they said, we applied in D.C. as a young people. The time has zero impact on approval. DC, as a young person, there will be more scrutiny to your work. You need to provide the following: letter that you write to your supervisor resigning from the job with resignation, letter accepted resignation from your supervisor, etc., etc., etc. So you can see, depending on the consulate, they will have stricter views, And this is evolving all the time. So that's another reason why you have to be part of the Spainguru's Non-Lucrative Visa Facebook group, because if you're in these specific situations, look, if you're retired and everything is very simple and easy, this is a do-it-yourself visa. But if you have a specific situation where you don't fall into the main category, let's say, or the general public, be careful with that, and always consult with a lawyer before applying, because it could be there could be costly mistakes. For example, it was a costly mistake for this the case of a Venezuelan national applying for an NLV at the Buenos Aires consulate, and he got denied because the consulate actually Googled him and saw that his LinkedIn profile showed activity. Some people say that the consulates are not allowed to Google you or do an investigation for you, but they do it. It is clear. And this person appealed this decision and went to Madrid's court, and Madrid's court said that the consulate was right to deny this person because this person was showing activity at the time of application on LinkedIn. Okay, so be careful with that. This is not a US or UK consulate, but Spanish consulates can evolve in their interpretations. Now let's talk about marriage birth certificates and non-married couples. Married couples need a valid and updated marriage certificate. Children need updated and valid birth certificates if you're applying with spouse and children or children. And also you can apply as a non-married couple as long as you make a strong case that you are really a couple, right? And benefit from applying as a main applicant plus a dependent. The threshold for financial threshold is lower than if you apply as two main applicants, which you can also do, right? So non-married couples can apply, but they need to prove that the relationship is real. If you show a legal partnership document, that's a very strong case. Or if you are stable partners, so you're not legal partners, but you're stable partners, if you prove that you have been cohabitating for more than 1 year, or if you have children together, it can be less than 1 year as well. So that also makes a stronger case. Remember that certificates need to be apostilled and need to be sworn translated to Spanish and need to be valid at the time of the application. Question, what about adult children and ascendants? Unfortunately, they cannot be dependents any longer and must apply as main applicants as of May 20th, 2025. So children under 18, yes, but if they're over 18, no, they need to apply as main applicants, okay, separately. And here's the Article 61 from the regulation with the underlying text that talks about this situation. You can watch it later on when I send you the recording. What are sworn translations? We talk about sworn translations all the time, but what is this sworn term, right? It's very important. Sworn translators are accredited by and only by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Not anyone can say I'm a sworn translator. You need to pass a very difficult exam to become certified by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and each sworn translator has a unique registration number. Their translations are accepted by all Spanish institutions, and that includes the consulates. So there are official translations. Translations are done remotely, sworn translations, and signed with a legally valid e-signature, so electronic signature. So no physical mail is needed. You don't need to put, in an envelope and send the document and wait to cross the ocean with the sworn translation. No, you just scan the document. For example, FBI background check. You get your FBI background check, you scan it, okay, or you get it already digitally, and you forward it to a sworn translator. You agree on the price, you agree on the delivery date of the translation, and then you get your sworn translation. You pay for it, of course, and you print it out, and that's what you submit in your non-lucrative visa application, okay? So this is one example. Can I use any translator from the American Translator Association? And I say this because the answer is no, you cannot use any translator. It has to be a sworn translator. The American Translator Association has, let's say, not much to do with the official sworn translator of the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Of course, a sworn translator from Spain could potentially be part of this association, but it is, let's say, a coincidence, right? And I mention this because Miami and LA mentioned the American Translator Association, but translators there are not necessarily appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They can be just like American translators that work doing translations but have nothing to do with the sworn translator. Of course, if you need recommended sworn translators, you can go on Spainguru.es and use the ones I recommend you that I have been recommending for years with stellar reviews and very affordable prices. Can a sworn translator work with several language pairs? No, they only do one pair. For example, English-Spanish or Spanish-English, okay? On Spainguru, you can find the first link recommended link can sworn translate to any language pair, for example, German or French or whatever. Okay, so you have them all on Spainguru.es. How much do sworn translations cost? Normally between 36 to 45 euros per page for the most common documents in order to submit the non-lucrative visa. How and what, sorry, what comes first, apostille then sworn translation? So experienced lawyers will sworn translate everything, but if you're applying by yourself, you want to save money, right? The thing is, like, lawyers, immigration lawyers, usually have appointed in-house sworn translators. For example, this is the case of Sterna Abogados. So they just sworn translate everything, just to make sure that there's no friction, okay, with the consulate. Because there's been some friction and denials eventually, because some official said, oh, I need a sworn translation of this document, okay, of the bank statements, for example, right? And some people, in order to save sworn translation, they deny it. Or for example, some officials said, like, you need to sworn translate the apostille as well, okay? Not only the original document, but the apostille of the document, because the apostille, the information that is on the apostille is not complete, okay? And some apostilles, they come in 3 languages, 4 languages, okay, including Spanish. And people say, like, well, it's already in Spanish, but the information is incomplete, okay? So this is the situation, right? So technically, the best you can do for the safest is you obtain your original document, you obtain the apostille of the document, and then you sworn translate both. And then you submit both, you know, originals and the sworn translation. This is the safest you can do. But of course, it's expensive. So you need to look at it carefully and see where you could take a risk. For example, it's bank statements. A lot of people say, should I sworn translate like 40 pages of bank statements? That's really expensive. So actually 77% of people didn't translate the sworn, didn't sworn translate the bank statements. They were, of course, in English, these bank statements. And 17% only sworn translated the summary pages. So they did a middle ground. 3% sworn translated everything. And some had banks who were able to provide the bank statements in Spanish. This is the case of Chase, for example, in the States. Now, remember that, side comment here. If you go to Spainguru.com and search for Spainguru's channel on YouTube, sorry, if you go to YouTube.com and you search for Spainguru, you will find that I almost have 1,000 videos there and 470 videos. That is 48% of the videos are about the Spanish non-lucrative visa. You have a playlist there and you can watch them all. Of course, you don't have to watch 470 videos, but I will tell you that at least the last 50 are very, very updated with interviews, comments on specifics, documentations, comments about discussions on Spainguru's Facebook group, so much more. So watch those videos. Take the time, because it gives you so much context and information, okay? Remember, there's a Q&A session at the end of this presentation where you can ask any question related to NLV or anything related to moving to Spain. And if you have to leave earlier for any reason, I will miss you, of course, but at least if you think that information I'm sharing with you today is valuable, please leave a review on Trustpilot, okay? You can just click that red button on the top, and it will just redirect you to Trustpilot. You can leave a review, and it takes only 5 seconds. Thank you so much if you do it. Now let's continue with during the application process. There's been a few changes after May 20th, although not all the consulates are applying these changes, but be aware that it could happen, right? This one, for example, this screenshot is from Manila Consulate, okay? But let's talk generally. All family members must apply for the visa. Consider that the application could be in person, especially if you're working with BLS. BLS, it's always an in-person application, but some consulates only work by mail, okay? For example, Panama Consulate. Also consider that you may need to pick up in person your visas, your passport with your visas inside, okay? And all the applicants need to be present, okay? This can happen, although some consulates and BLS office offers you the option to pay to get their passports at home, sent at home, okay? So it will depend on the consulate and the BLS office, right? And now the non-lucrative visa will, some of the non-lucrative visas, if not all now, are granted for a year validity, okay, 365 days. Although it is not very clear whether you can enter Spain during that whole validity period. Actually, I have interviewed Anoa Manero about this situation, asking her, and I highly recommend you watching this video. All these videos are like maybe 2-3 minutes long, so it doesn't take too long to watch a few videos, but it's highly valuable, in my opinion, if you're applying for this visa, to know all these nuances. But basically, she's saying that it is not clear that you can enter Spain during those 365 days. You should still do it within 90-day window, just as it used to be. Okay. The reason why they give you the 365 days now is because once you are in Spain, it takes so long to get an appointment with the police station to get your fingerprints taken and get your residency card that many people expire their visa validity and end up without a residency card. Therefore, they're in a no man's land and they cannot, let's say, risk to get out of the country, etc. They're in a way stuck, okay, in Spain in this situation. And this is a common situation, okay, because of the lack of appointments. So this is why now the consulates are granting you a 1-year validity period. But be careful because the initial entry, maybe should not be after 90 days of the visa validity period start. And she has asked the authorities to confirm the situation about when to enter Spain. Okay, so but still no answer on that side, unfortunately. And I will inform you when we get it. Now, this is also someone who was explaining about this, that I just mentioned to you why they have extended this for 1 year instead of the normal 90 days validity period, and some common mistakes to avoid in your process. First, not checking the specific consular requirements. So there are like actually 4 things you need to check, and you need to do it constantly, okay? Because they change all the time. First, the official requirements in English from your consulate. Second, in Spanish. The list may not be matching, okay? BLS requirements are always in English, as far as I understand. So also check those, okay? And there could be mismatches with the consulate list. And then there are internal requirements, and that is people who have gone to the consulates or the BLS offices, and they saw papers posted on the wall with some extra stuff, like, tax forms, stuff that were not in the official requirements, but still they need to provide. Okay, so stay in touch, be part of the community, ask your questions, make sure to read the first-hand experiences, because people will tell you like incredible things, okay? And they could potentially deny you or create a headache if you don't go prepared with all the documents, even the ones that they don't publish online, okay? An example now is Manchester. Now with the new certificates from the banks that London has published, if you go to Manchester, they don't publish those certificates, but still they're asking for them. Okay, so be careful with that. Then also showing wrong documents, expired documents, validity periods that are expired, wrong chronology, people who start gathering the police check, but they forgot that they got married in Trinidad and Tobago, and that actually takes months to get an original marriage certificate, and not to mention it's apostle. Okay, so be careful with that. Showing a wrong health insurance with co-payment clauses, for example, or a certificate of coverage that doesn't have the right wording. Say that you plan to work or not enough proof that you don't plan to work, or that you are not doing a great job convincing the officer that you will not be working. Okay, this also happens. The younger you are, the more you need to convince them that you are not working. And of course, it will depend on the type of income that you have. For example, if you're receiving a pension, then there's not going to be so much scrutiny about this, okay? Because they conclude that you plan to retire and don't go back to work. Now let's talk about timings, okay? You should start at least 6 months before your intended date to arrive to Spain, at the very least, okay? US, Canada, Australia, even UK, okay? Depending on your situation. If your case is straightforward, it doesn't have to take so long, okay? Most consulates will retain their passports during the visa processing. In the US, the applicants can get a second passport, let's say, separately, of course. It's not the Spanish consulate doing it, but you can request to the US authorities to get a second passport in case you need to travel. And it's not that difficult. People have done it. And in BLS, depending on the consulate, you can fill a form requesting to keep your passport. It is very hard, almost impossible to get a second passport because of applying for a Spanish visa in the UK. But some consulates, for example, Manchester now has a form that you can fill it up and request to keep your passport. Okay, so that happens, but not all the consulates have that option. And actually, I don't know now for London or Edinburgh, it's the same as Manchester. So be careful with that. And normally your documents preparation will take 2 to 3 months, attending the apostles and so on, translating. Attending the appointment will happen in the 3rd month. Waiting for the approval can be anything from 1 week to even more than 3 months. There's a 10-day period if clarifications of that documentation are asked. You can choose a visa start date in a 90-day window from application date, and that is actually changing now, but it is not being applied by the consulates very well, but we're going to read about it. And once you enter Spain, you are officially required to obtain your TIE card, Tarjeta de Identidad Extranjera, which is your residency plastic card with your face that you obtain at a police station or foreign office after putting your fingerprints and showing documentation. Okay, that will be the proof of your residency status in Spain. Then your visa will expire and you will have your TIE card. And when you renew your residency, they will give you a new card valid for 2 more years. Okay, and up to 5 years. Now, someone was saying that you can ask for the visa to be valid for up to 3 months in advance. However, the difficulty I found was finding a health insurance company who will work that far out, as most only do 2, and now most only do 1. So be careful with that. As I said, if you use Spainguru's recommended exclusive agent, he can extend the visa the health insurance policy start date, and that could be a lifesaver. Now let's talk about the process and the timeline. So imagine that each of those segments is 1 month. So when you submit your non-lucrative visa, let's say you can choose a starting date in the future, okay? And then maybe if that starting date in the future, the processing time is shorter and the consulate says, okay, we can start it the date in which you asked, they will grant you that wish, let's say, no? So imagine that you choose something 90 days after your submission, okay, to start. And the consulate grants you the visa before that, and the date that you chose and that the consulate granted you is letter B in red. So now they will give you a visa that is valid for 1 year, but maybe it is very clever to enter Spain within 90 days, the first 90 days of that visa validity period, and you will get a clarification about that. And you enter Spain on letter C. That is almost at the end of those 90 days, you enter Spain, all right? And then you have 1 month to get your TIE card, okay? And your renewal will be starting 60 days prior to the expiration date and up to 90 days after the expiration date, okay? But everyone recommends doing the renewal 60 days before, because if you get denied or you get any problems, you still have time to apply again, get the documentation, etc. So definitely it is better to do it before it expires. Another way to see the process, and this is for information purposes only, can vary very much. Some things can overlap, some things can come after or before. But yeah, first, and summarize. Find your Spanish consulate, check the official requirements, start with the police check, get the medical certificate, 3 months validity period. It has to be valid when you apply. Apostille and sworn translate everything that needs to. Obtain your private health insurance, or S1 if you're a pensionist, if you don't plan to apply with the private health insurance. Book your appointment. Actually, booking your appointment can start even much earlier, because right now it's very hard to obtain appointments at the consulates. Attend the appointment, submit the paperwork, wait for your notification, okay? Receive your passport with your visa, travel to Spain. Once you travel to Spain, obtain an empadronamiento. That is, when you rent a house, for example, you go to the city hall and you show the rental contract, the ID of the landlord and everything, and they will give you a certificate that says this is a proof of address that you're living there, because this empadronamiento will be required from 90% of the national police stations in order to prove your address in Spain, in order to issue the residency card. Okay, so the empadronamiento is also important. And also, in order to obtain the empadronamiento, not all the rental contracts work, so you need to read in depth about that. So be careful before renting a property. You need to make sure that you will be able to get your empadronamiento. Okay. Another way to see it, and with special focus on the time frames, first you start with the police check. If you're going with your spouse or children, marriage, birth certificates, you will sworn translate and you will apostille them. Then on the 3rd month, okay, and 2 months before the appointment, you will get your financial documents, medical certificates. You start to try to get your appointment at the consulate or VLS office, and then you will get your health insurance, right? And at the time of the appointment, which is the red dotted line, the official documents need to be valid, okay? And then you will wait for the processing period, and then you will enter Spain during the visa validity days, and your health insurance coverage will start. That's another way to see it. Now, there is an update about the application process. Applications must now be submitted no later than 2 months before your planned arrival in Spain, unless exceptional reasons justify a shorter time frame. You can submit your application as early as 6 months. I've never seen this before. So this is new rules. And the way Spain works is that they create new rules, and then they let the civil servants and consulates do the best they can to apply them. So this is the situation which we are. No, we are transitioning from earlier rules into new rules, but they don't have to be everything happening, from one day to another. It takes some time to get used to it. But basically, you can submit your application as early as 6 months and up to 2 months prior to your intended entry date. Okay. And now there's also a decision deadline in which after 1 month from the moment in which the foreign office in Spain receives your documentation, okay, and there is no answer, okay, there should be a default rejection. Okay, this is called silencio administrativo negativo. Okay, which is administrative silence negative. Okay, which is like if the authorities don't say anything, you could consider it to be denied. Okay, it doesn't have to be denied, but you could consider it denied, and you have the right to already appeal if you want. Okay, so this is the situation. Also, I have interviewed Ainhoa Manero about all these new rules. Okay, so watch the videos. And this is the Article 63 about the procedure of the NLV with the highlighted text talking about these things that we just mentioned. Coming back to taxes, if you plan to sell your properties, you want to avoid potentially capital gains tax in the state in Spain. The best way to do that is to time your move so that you don't become a Spanish tax resident the same year in which you sell your properties. There are ways to mitigate this tax regardless of when you sell and when you become your Spanish tax resident. Like if you're older than 65, you reinvest all the proceeds of your sale into your primary residence, etc. This is for information purposes only, for illustrative purposes only. Basically, the best way you can do to avoid this tax is, as I said, to become a Spanish tax resident on a different tax year in which you sell your property. The first case, the first line, you sell your property in 2025 and you move to Spain in 2026. Simple. Or if you plan to sell your property at the beginning of 2026, make sure not to be in Spain until at very least July 2nd, because there's only 182 days left during that calendar year. If you want to know more about taxes and any other things related to it, make sure to read Spainguru's blog, watch the videos. I also have many dozens of videos about taxes and can be quite useful. Now let's talk about after the application. And this is about living in Spain on a non-lucrative visa and how you arrive to Spain once your visa is granted. So there's two options. Either you come to Spain from outside of Schengen, in which you will get a passport stamp, or now there's a new system that will be in place, but they're always delaying it, so I don't know when that will happen. But supposedly by the end of this year, we're going to have ETIAS, which is, reading your eyes and put your fingerprints. So that will act basically as a passport stamp. If you travel, for example, if you fly from New York to Madrid, you will get the stamp from Spanish authorities. But there's also the option that you enter Spain via another Schengen country. For example, if you drive from France to Spain, you will not cross a border, let's say. You will not see a border control. Or if you fly from Frankfurt to Madrid, so you fly from New York to Frankfurt, Madrid, you will get the stamps of German authorities, okay? In that situation, if you enter Spain via a Schengen country, the best you can do is to get declaración de entrada. Okay, a declaración de entrada is a one-page document. There's an article where I show you and I give you a template. I give you the official document that you can print and fill. And you have to go to a police station, normally a police station at the airport or close to the border, because other police stations, they will not know what you're talking about. But those police stations that are used to signing this, you bring this one-page document that they stamp, and now you have an official proof of your date of entry into Spain by Spanish authorities, namely the police, because then when you go to get your TIE card, the police shows, you show this document proving that you enter Spain. Some people say, oh, you don't need this, you can show your boarding passes or gas station tickets. Honestly, this could be, there's been cases, not very common, but there's been cases where people were requested to get out again from Schengen area and come back in to get a Spanish stamp. Okay, so careful with that, you can avoid it. And if you excuse me, I will take a little sip of water. Excuse me, thank you. Another tip is to get a Spanish SIM card, because many procedures will send you SMS. Okay, many official sources will send you SMS to call you for appointments, etc. Open a non-resident bank account. Can take you weeks or even months to become officially a resident, to get your residency card because of lack of appointments. but you'll need a bank account to pay your rent, to pay your utilities, to pay many things. And all the brick and mortar banks, as far as I know, most of them, they offer non-resident bank accounts, and then you can change the status to a resident bank account once you become a resident. Obtaining an empadronamiento, as I mentioned before, that is usually valid for 3 months, which is registering your rental contract at the city hall where you live. That should be used when you apply for the Tarjeta de Identidad Extranjero, although not all the police stations require it, 90% do. And as I said, you have officially 30 days to register, to obtain your TIE, residency card, after you enter Spain. Is the padrón strictly necessary to obtain the TIE? And second question, there are no appointments to obtain the TIE. What should I do? And this is a lawyer. I'm quoting a lawyer who said, the TIE appointment, in practice, it is not required within 1 month, okay? Because there are no appointments, especially in Valencia now. It's very, very hard. You can try to get appointments anywhere in the same province, okay? In a little town out there, in the middle of the mountains, at a police station, you could obtain a TIE card, okay? But you need to get an appointment, right? And right now, it's quite difficult anywhere in Spain. And as he says, appointment can take up to 6 months without issue. So the sooner the better, but there's no immediate rush. So don't get paranoid if you can't get your TIE card appointment right away. There's nothing going to happen if you're over those 30 official days. And the empadronamiento, officially, it is not really needed to obtain the first TIE, okay? And the big police stations, for example, in Malaga, where I live, there's a big police station, central police station, and then there's smaller police stations. And the big police station, for example, doesn't require you to show an empadronamiento for the issue of your TIE card, okay? But smaller police stations tend to ask for it, okay? So let's say 90% of police stations ask for the empadronamiento. It's better if you have it, okay? But instead, you could potentially show an Airbnb receipt or a rental contract or anything that proves your address, right? But it's up for the police officer to understand what it is proof or not. So yeah, that's the situation. So hopefully you can obtain an empadronamiento and have it, and should be valid when you apply for your TIE card. Renewal process, how and when to renew your non-lucrative visa. Year 1, the moment you enter Spain within your visa period. So people also ask, like, can I enter as a tourist before your visa period? And I recently published an article about this with all the risks of doing so. And yes, you can do it if you don't need a Schengen visa, okay? If you need a Schengen visa, be careful. But yeah, you can enter Spain as a tourist, but it can have certain implications that are not very nice. And potentially, the officer could request you to get out of the Schengen area and come back in as well. And also, or the officer can say, oh, you enter 89 days before your visa validity period. Right, I'm going to start your residence the day you enter as a tourist in Spain, and not when your visa started. So now you have to renew, let's say, earlier than initially expected. So all these kind of things can happen. So be careful with that. Enter Spain within your visa validity period and get a proof of entry. Then the first renewal for year 2 and 3, within 60 days before expiration on your TIE card and up to 90 days after expiration. And the financial requirements for renewal, as we said, 2x if savings. But if you're receiving recurring passive income, you have to calculate the full income that you will obtain during the next 2-year period, for example, pension or dividends or interests, etc. Right? You can always, of course, use a combination of both, or just passive income or just savings, but it will have an implication on how much money you need to show you have in that 2-year period for the renewal. The funds need to be readily available without penalties, okay? And potentially, and in the account when you're renewing, okay? So I ask people, where do you have the funds? And 90% of people said in the US, in the UK, they didn't have Spanish bank account with the funds. But some regions love to see your money and activity in a Spanish bank account. So for example, Canary Islands and Valencia, they have this request, or Alicante. So this can change all the time. So also be part of the community and ask about this and organize your renewal correctly, okay? And of course, if you can, use legal help. Then the second renewal for year 4 and 5, and long-term residence after 5 years, also called permanent residence, okay? If you want to, let's say, transition to this other residence. Long-term residence is much better than a lucrative residence because you don't need to show funding, and you get a work permit, okay, with a long-term residence. So great, right? And it is very easy to apply. It's quite fast. You don't have to show too much documentation, but it's very important that you haven't had gaps in your health insurance coverage, and you had to have an interrupted residency in Spain. So if you had any gaps on those, be careful, okay? And again, coming back to, entering Spain on a non-lucrative visa with a private health insurance and then changing to a convenio especial or not renewing your private health insurance, all those things can have a very strong impact in your renewal of your visa and potentially transitioning to a long-term residence. So be careful with that. Plan well your strategy. Okay, so there are no gaps. Renewal process update and changes effective May 20th. They stay at 2 years renewal periods. But now the Congress has added a new minimum stay requirement for the renewal of the visa of a 180-day period, minimum stay in Spain. So visa holders are required to spend at least 183 days per year in Spain to qualify for the renewal. Okay, many people say that this will align with Spanish tax residency rules, which is not quite true. Okay, and I need to change the wording of this slide because, as we said, tax year and immigration year are different. They may overlap or they may not, because tax year is calendar year and immigration year is natural year. So actually, to the million-dollar question, do I have to become a tax resident in Spain, if I want to renew the visa? And the answer is a straight no. You don't have to, okay? Because there is legal ambiguity. The 183-day rule is currently only included in the reglamento. As I said, it's a lower hierarchy, okay? And the Supreme Court has ruled that the minimum stay requirement for the renewal of a temporary visa, like the non-lucrative visa, has to be included in the organic law, and they haven't, okay? And it is much harder to include it, okay? So really, it's not enforceable, this minimum stay requirement. Therefore, in order to renew your visa, you don't need to stay 183 days in Spain, okay? In a natural year, immigration year, which may or not overlap with tax residence. So if you're in this situation in which you want to play with this, go with legal help by experts like Stan Abogados or CABR Relocation Services, or like the ones that I recommend on Spainguru.es, because they know this rule well and can play on your favor. And it used to have, the previous reglamento used to have a minimum 180 days, but since there was a Supreme Court ruling, they deleted this from the reglamento. So the same reason should apply for this new requirement, but there is a separation of powers. There is the Supreme Court, there is the Congress here, and they need to clarify things, because the Supreme Court actually has the power to remove this, and they have said that they should not include this minimum stay. So I have videos about that where I interview immigration lawyers about this. You're welcome to watch them. Now, renewal process, case study. Imagine there's a couple, 72,000 euros minimum threshold. That is 36,000 euros per year multiplied by 2. So this is the minimum financial threshold for them to renew. Imagine that the main applicant is receiving recurrent pension, passive income, of 15,000 euros annually. That means that they should count those 15,000 euros times 2, because annually this person will, the first year, receive 15,000, and the second year will receive another 15,000. Total, they have proved that thanks to the pension, they will receive 30,000 euros. Therefore, they only have to prove remaining 42,000 euros to get to 72,000 euros, which they can show additional savings, for example, from their bank. They could also compete with rental income, with dividends, with any recurrent passive income, okay, or savings, okay, and combine all that in order to be over the threshold. Okay, as I said, be careful with rental income, because some authorities think that it's not safe income, and sometimes they may not even count it. So be careful with that. Remember, you need to have ongoing private medical insurance coverage, okay, or public healthcare coverage without gaps. Updated passport copies, so note invalid passports or expired, etc. Okay, and ongoing coverage, as we said, and no police records is very important from Spain, right? So they will check if you have police records. So, no driving under the influence in Spain, stuff like that, because it could be a reason for denial. Okay, so that's happened. And you will have to show the empadronamiento for the renewal. That is a requirement, most places. Time you need to spend in Spain in order to renew your visa, your residence, your long-term residence, your citizenship, or apply for citizenship. For the NLB renewal, we said it's ambiguity, legal ambiguity. They require you to be 183 days, but this should not be enforced because of the Supreme Court ruling. Watch the video with Ainhoa about this. Second thing, in order to apply for the long-term residence, remember that you can't be outside of Spain more than 10 months in a 5-year period in order to apply for the long-term residence. This is also another requirement, apart from the health coverage. And sometimes, if people don't comply with this minimum stay requirements, you could apply for potentially an extraordinary third 2-year NOV renewal, which not every region allows. For example, Galicia doesn't allow it. Okay, and if you plan to apply for the nationality, especially for people who can benefit from the 2-year fast track to apply for the citizenship, make sure those people and people who are holders of temporary residency, you cannot be outside of Spain more than 90 days per each year. Okay, so yeah, be careful with those minimum stays for all these different procedures, because and plan your strategy, your long-term strategy correctly in order to comply with these minimum stay requirements and other requirements. And if you plan to apply for the, if you're a holder of long-term residence and plan to apply for Spanish nationality, you cannot be outside of Spain, from the EU more than 1 year consecutively or no more than 30 months in 5 years. Okay, so that's important. Now let's talk about the most common pathways in order to transition from work permit after 1 year to work permit. And these are the most common ones. They're not the only ones. So the first one is start your own business, cuenta propia. Okay, you can present a project and the authorities have to accept it, and potentially they will give you a work permit if your project is valid, is viable. Okay, so you can change your non-lucrative residence into a work permit for your own project. Or if you receive an offer, job offer from a company who is okay to sponsor you, you can also modify to a work permit, cuenta ajena. Okay, or potentially you could transition to a digital nomad visa. Okay, and this is again people who have been under the radar, working remotely for non-Spanish companies, because you need to at least have been working for at least 3 months before applying for the digital nomad visa. Okay, so this is a gray area and quite controversial, but people are doing this transition as well. Okay, now some recommendations in order to go through this process. Simple. First, you obtain your non-lucrative visa, then you renew it. Make sure that you renew it and you are granted 2 years residency, and then after that you apply for the modification for a work permit. Okay, because if the work permit is granted, great, fantastic, success. But if it's not granted, then you would have to leave the country basically if you didn't renew your non-lucrative residency. So now that you have renewed your non-lucrative residency and you have 2 years in front of you, if your work permit is not granted, at least you have a valid legal residency to stay in Spain. Now, we mentioned that some people can benefit for 2-year fast track in order to apply for the Spanish passport. Most nationalities, in order to apply for the citizenship by residency, they need to live legally in Spain for at least 10 years. This is the case for the US, UK, Canada, and all the countries in gray in that map. But the passport holders of the countries in red, like Latin American, Philippines, Andorra, Portugal, and Guinea Equatorial, they can benefit from 2-year fast track of legal residence in Spain. So after only 2 years, they can apply for the Spanish passport. So provided they have the minimum stay requirements. So it's very interesting, especially for people who hold dual citizenship, like Puerto Ricans, for example, Americans who are Puerto Ricans, or who have like Mexican parents, okay? But basically you need to be considered to be a citizen by origin by those countries, okay? In order to benefit for the 2 years fast track. So I have a lot of videos about this. You can watch them or read the blog post as well. And remember, you can use Spainguru for absolutely free. You have a weekly newsletter, YouTube channel, blog post, Facebook groups. Join them. Make sure to read all this. It's absolutely free. It takes a little bit of time, of course, but you're not going to be charged whatsoever, and you're going to get so much information. And you can also use my Move to Spain checklist, okay, which is a timeline that starts 1 year before moving to Spain, and that includes the situation of applying for a non-lucrative visa as well. So it's packed with articles, with videos, with potentially professionals who can help you in the different steps, etc. So very, very interesting, in my opinion, to also have a look to the Move to Spain checklist. Okay, and if you plan to engage with professionals, I have recommended professionals for every single thing that you need. If you plan to move to Spain, immigration, tax advisors, financial planners, and so many more services out there. Just go on Spainguru.es, and on the top bar, you have services, okay? And you push there, and you will see a huge list of vetted partners that I have been recommending for several years, all with stellar reviews. So yeah, you're in good hands. And yeah, this is a bonus slide. I asked people, have you gone with professional help for your NLB application, or you did it yourself? So basically, 128 votes, 50% said I've been with legal help. The other half said I did it myself. Then I asked to the people who went with legal help Was it worth the investment? So roughly 77% said yes, and 23% said I could have done it myself. But this is not exclusive for Spainguru's recommended partners. This is just in general, okay? Asking people if they've been with a visa processing company or lawyer, etc. Right? So generally, people are happy to, almost 80% of people say like, yeah, like legal help was worth the investment, okay, for this visa. A lot of visas is even higher. Like digital nomad visa is like 99% people go with lawyers because it's a total minefield, even more than the non-lucrative visa. We can stay in touch at hello@spainguru.es. Join the group. You can always send me an email. Okay, I always answer my emails and try to give you the best of my answers and at least point you out to content related to your question or professional services that may help you. So yeah, always send me an email. Don't doubt it. I always answer my emails, and yeah, I'm very, very happy staying in touch with you guys. And watch the YouTube videos, join the newsletter, and remember the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your consulate requirements. Now we're gonna go to a Q&A session, and if you plan to leave earlier, please make sure to leave a Trustpilot review. It really makes me happy and keep me going. Motivates me so much, and also helps others to find this content. If you think it is valuable and provides light on this sometimes dark subjects, please leave a review there, and yeah, that would be extremely helpful. Now let's go to a Q&A session. It's not, sir.
Yes, my name is Slava. So
Slava?
yes, so I don't know how much is it relevant for this group, because most of the people here are applied from US, UK, Australia, Canada. I was applying from Tel Aviv, in Israel, and
From Tel Aviv, Israel. Okay.
Yes, it went pretty smooth. Pretty well. I only forgot one document, form 790. Sorry, form 790. I forgot. I actually tried to fill it, but I haven't success in obtaining this form online, so I haven't brought it. But they gave me to fill it in on site.
So let me ask you a few things. Let me ask you a little bit about the timeline and process. So first of all, can you share your age? You don't have to, but if you want.
I'm not the retirement age, as you can see. I'm pretty young. In my mid-30s.
So that's important, because it's not that a lot of people are applying very young. You're much younger than me. I'm 45, but they usually face more scrutiny. Was it your case?
Sorry.
Was it your case that you faced more scrutiny about the risk of you coming back to work?
No, actually, they haven't asked me about the job at all. They haven't asked me about if I worked, if I'm working, if I have a letter from my ex-employer or something, other documents. I myself told them that I'm not working, and that's it. They haven't asked any question regarding the job. They also haven't asked if I plan to work. Obviously, I wrote in my cover letter that I'm not planning to work and do any economical or some activity, gainful activity, financial gainful activity, to fully comply with non-lucrative visa terms.
Okay, let's move on to let's say more general. Let's say about your application process, about the timeline. First of all, was it did you have to attend an appointment? Does it work with BLS?
No, it's directly.
It's the consulate, right?
Yes, it's consulate directly. No third party involved.
And did you have to attend an appointment, or it was everything by submission, by mail submission?
No, I attended an appointment. I just came back from consulate, and I applied by myself. I haven't used any lawyer or any company. I talked with a few people, and they explained me exactly what to do. And I feel my biggest concern was about the bank documentation.
Okay.
The new rule requesting the average balance of the previous year this is what a lot of people have with the problems. So yesterday, what I did, what my bank actually does not provide the average balance of the previous year, but it does provide me the quarterly balance.
Quarterly, okay.
4 quarterly balances of the previous year, but it was in Hebrew, not in English. So I did a sworn translation of these reports, and I compiled myself a letter that I wrote that my bank cannot provide a letter with the average balance. So I calculated it myself and brought the number.
Did you calculate the monthly average balance by yourself?
Not monthly, the yearly.
The yearly one, okay.
Yearly.
Got it.
But when I was applying, I brought my 12 months bank statements, and the lady told us that is fine. I also gave these documents with the average balances and my calculations with the sworn translation. She told that it's very good, but if I understand correctly, it's not 100% required.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, consulates outside the UK and the US tend to be quite accommodating, you see, because I think they get less volume of.
Exactly. I think
so they're like more, less stressed out and with less guidelines from.
Exactly. I think in Israel requirements are slightly lighter than in US and UK. Because I think there is not a lot of people that apply from Israel for this type of visa. Doesn't mean that there is not a lot of people want to move, but most of the people in Israel they have another European passport, so they don't need this type of visas.
Just one second, because there was one question here from another member. I would just like answer very quickly, and then I would like to continue with you. It's very interesting. But someone asked, is there an age exemption for capital gains for the sale of a home? So we're going to talk about capital gains tax in Spain. I don't know your origin country where you're selling your home, but in general in Spain, and I'm not a tax advisor, but when you're over 65 years of age, and you sell your primary home, not a secondary home, not your vacation home, but your primary home, then and if you use the proceeds of that sale in order to buy a home in Spain, your primary home, yes, then you could be exempt of your capital gains tax if you're a Spanish tax resident when all this happens, right? And I could be wrong with the details, but more or less is that this would be the age I have in mind, is 65 years of age. I have an article on Spainguru about it. If you write Spainguru capital gains tax, you have there the article that you can read, and there's a video about it. But I always, my mind always tricks me, and I make mistakes. So it's important that you check that, and you check official information. You can always send me an email, and I can maybe search for you and send you the official links to this tax. Okay. So now let's continue with Slava. Thank you so much for really like sharing your experience today. What are the blocks that you found? Like a little bit like catch-22 situations or anything, or was it straightforward? Everything was perfect.
I had a few things that I missed. I haven't filled in the blanks. They also didn't ask me about the address or where I'm going to live in Spain. The address they didn't ask. They only asked which region I'm planning to move, and they wrote it on one of the blanks in Spain. That's it. It was pretty straightforward. Didn't have any difficulties. Didn't have much difficulties with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Only bank statements. I was a bit worried, and other things. Another thing. I bought the medical certificate. The medical certificate of good health. I brought it. I used the template, but I also went to Ministry of Health, which they approved. I got a document from Ministry of Health of Israel that stated that the medical certificate, it was filled by my family doctor, and the certificate from Ministry of Health stated that this doctor with this license number has rights to practice medicines in the state of Israel, and the stamp.
And now that you mentioned health related things, although there's not much relation, I wanted to ask you about health insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in your case, you had to purchase a private health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And when did you choose to start it? And when is your intended date, or you selected the date in which you plan to move to Spain?
So I put my selected date, starting date of visa as October 1st, 2025.
Okay, so today is August 11th.
Yeah.
And you asked the consulate, can you please start it on in October 1st?
Yeah.
So in about
2 months.
1.5 months.
A bit less than 2 months.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this is a date when my health insurance starts also.
Okay, so you ask also to start the health insurance policy.
Yeah, I did it with agent. I did it with Sanitas. Yeah, we as agent.
All right. And what else I wanted to ask you about? I want to see, now I have the opportunity to have you here. Maybe you can provide some interesting insights about some other parts of the. You mentioned address in Spain, they were not strict. You just said, okay, I'm moving to whatever, Andalusia or to Valencia, whatever.
Asturias, in my case.
Asturias in your case. Fantastic choice, Slava. Fantastic choice. For the financial means, you said it was a bit complicated with the certificate, but in the end, you prove it with your own means.
They didn't ask really for the certificates. They told me
they were not strict.
12 months was enough, really.
So health insurance, you started the same month. So you guesstimated that they will process it before the 1st of October. You selected 1st of October, and that's when you start your policy. So in line to what I said before in the presentation, no? The background check, for example.
In Israel, you cannot get it in your hands directly. You order it to the embassy, to Consulate. So about 2 months ago, I ordered it to Embassy of Spain in Tel Aviv. I went there, took it, from them.
You lived in Spain before?
No, I came to the embassy to Consulate before. To took my criminal certificate check. Yeah.
But the criminal record has to be from the place where you lived.
I live in Israel.
So
Israel sent it
by Israel authorities, no?
Yes, by Israel authorities, but they don't send it to me.
They send it to the Consulate of Spain.
Yes, to the Consulate of Spain.
Okay.
Or they can send it to the Embassy of Israel in Spain or other country.
Right.
So I went 2 months before to Consulate to Spain, took my criminal certificate, apostilled it, translated it, and
And one question, are you applying by yourself, or are you bringing partners or family?
No, a single person.
Okay, cool. What about letter of intent? Did you provide a letter of intent?
I wrote a letter. I told that I'm my name. I'm planning to stay in Asturias. I don't work but have enough financial resources to support myself. I'm planning to learn Spanish language while I will be in Spain. I also
the typical friendly, let's say, motivational type of letter, not so much explaining your finances, or not so much.
I planning to travel maybe to other countries which are close to to Spain, like Portugal, France, or something like this.
Right. I wanted to ask you, this is the last question, just the small things, like the photography, fees payment, all these. You remember those things?
Fees payment in cash.
In cash.
Currency. Yes, photography, they actually only took one photography in the main blank. And that's it.
All right. Do you think we left anything on the side we didn't comment?
I asked them, did I brought all the documents? They told yes. I asked them, have I missed something? They told no, and they gave me the receipt with a web page where I can check status of my application. They also told me that in the web I can check only if the decision has been made, but they don't give in they don't provide in is a positive or negative decision. So I need I will give status update. They will let me status update. The decision has been made, and I need to go to the embassy, and then they will let me know if it's positive or negative.
They like to give you surprises.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, well, I don't have any more questions. I really appreciate that you joined today and you gave us your first-hand experience. And I'm positive, and I will be crossing my fingers for your application.
Me too. Now it's a waiting game.
Asturias.
Yeah. Thank you.
I hope you get your answer very soon and that everything goes smoothly. Really appreciate it again.
Yes, thank you for your help and information too. I used a lot of help from your resources and groups.
And if you did, leave it then a Trustpilot review. Don't forget that.
Of course. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Slava, and stay in touch. All right. Take care. Yeah. Well, there are no more questions. That was fantastic to have a candid conversation. It's always nice to hear first-hand experiences from Spainguru community members and people who attend the webinar. As you can see, a lot of the information is relevant regardless if you're applying from other countries. People who are applying a lot from Philippines as well. People applying from Turkey join these webinars and can use the information on Spainguru. So the fact that that I focus so much in let's say American applicants or UK applicants doesn't mean that I would say 95% of the information is absolutely valid also for you. But yeah, thank you so much. We are finishing now more than 2 hours in this presentation and Q&A session. And yeah, it's a lot. Thank you so much. Stay in touch. And you can always send me an email to hello@spainguru.es. And if you're watching this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Goodbye. Take care.